Budget committee meeting, just for one final review. Today we're just going to be looking at the total priorities. We've done them all. I did notice a comparison between our budget category document and our budget interest document. There was one or two things that weren't accounted for, so I make sure we took care of those. We had some late budget interest last time, and we did some prioritization, and I just feel like I'd like to have you just see it all from start to finish and make sure we're satisfied with it. We are a smaller group, so I'll probably be sharing with the board the information from last time and this time, just because we don't really have a full group here. But I think it's still worth getting feedback from us all about those overall priorities. So how we'll approach this is kind of like we did before. I've given you new line numbers that we'll refer to in our conversation. And I just wanted to orient you just to some groups. And I make some groups of what I thought I understood by the time we finished. And I just want to make sure we come back to that. We'll talk about them in groups, but what our real goal is really to eliminate these groups. It'll just be a sequence list of budget interests, and make sure they're all in there in the spot we think is the best spot. So just to start with, at the top you'll see some revisions to some fixed costs, so that kind of worked out to be a little bit better opportunity for us with additional dollars that are not fixed costs, but you can see the fixed costs. Typically, the compensation increases for 2% is not considered a fixed cost, but as a committee, we just looked at that from the get-go. We wanted to make sure that that was in there. In fact, you as a committee prioritize an additional 1% as what you want straight off the top. So you take the 2 plus the 1, we're looking at overall 3% set aside for compensation. So meeting your expectations. Renee, you're still back in the conversation, so nod for me. Yep. Okay, thank you. Give it a thumbs up or a nod. Okay, so we're going to skip past line 1. We just confirmed that. Oh, this is going in and out. All right, now if you'll look at items 2 through 5, and I think 2 through 5, and even 2 through 10 even. Really where we spent most of our time in conversation, so I just want to make sure we get to the latter end of it. So I just want to know if those all still meet the sequence that you understood and you expected, but haven't changed thoughts on that. You mentally review that. And the reason why I'm line 3, this one regarding color, line 3, that is actually color-coded green on the screen, because later in the document you'll see another green one where we chose which of the 2, and so this green one is the one we chose. Any other changes, suggestions? All right. Okay, so now this next group,
I believe these were prioritized next, but I just want to confirm that with you all, and we can look at them either individually or as a group. You can help direct that conversation. All of those, we didn't really associate a cost with them because be paid for and taken care of. So from that standpoint, I don't know that it's highly critical that it has a necessarily prioritization, but I just wanted to make sure that these were prioritized from your standpoint above anything else and or not higher than some of the 1 through 10. So will you just look at the next group of 11 through 14 and tell me if they are positioned by their line number in the order that they should be. Or thinking that we simply set these aside because they're not a budget interest, they don't have a dollar associated with them, not giving something specifically. Just want to know how we like how these show up in the documents. So it's our calling people to look at quite
I think they're nice to see that money is found in another way. I think that helps, the board understand that we found other revenues and pathways, and then it shows what areas we've supported in other ways too, because then this is leaning towards
Mm-hmm.
Am I repeating that into a microphone? I think that having them.
We're going to give you a mic with a microphone. There you go.
Okay, so what I was saying is for the board to be able to look at areas that were found to be supported in another way, I felt important because it shows commitment to those classes of support. So it, showing instructional coaches, resources for teachers, and that increase in pay for grounds and the emergency long-term subs. I feel like that helps them understand that we've supported these additional areas so that I guess it looks a little more balanced in the areas that we're supporting.
So shall I just leave them at 11, 12, 13, and 14? They're there. They were prioritized highly, but we will leave them there. Okay. All right. This next group, I think we had, really some healthy conversations around what these things were. So let's look at 15 through 21 as a next grouping, and just where you are okay with prioritization for those.
So am I correct in remembering that from this point down, most likely won't see financial support? Am I correct? 15, yep, 15, 16 and below.
Can we move 15 up with the others that are in the positive and not a 0? So that would be in the group that they would be voting on? Does that make sense?
We will share all of this. And so right now I put these black bars in really as a function of being able to facilitate this meeting so you can see a group of these at a time, because that's kind of how we addressed it during the meeting. But we'll essentially be taking out these black lines, and it'll just be a sequence prioritized list. You'll see the drop down of the dollars just like you do.
So what we will do is put a bigger bar underneath what things above the line that we believe, we anticipate being able to fit within the budget, things below the line that we anticipate perhaps not being able to be in the budget. So I think your interest is to make it really clear which ones, were prioritized above the line and which ones were not. So that's how it will appear going forward. It will be published back out to all of our staff, to share with the working committee and also to share with the governing board. So thank you for that. I just wanted to be clear that these big groupings kind of go away after we finalize these conversations.
And so for clarification, this is just our recommendations. The board is going to look at this and they get to make their own decisions. So this is just our recommendation, correct?
Yeah.
And, and typically, because we've been so integral back and forth in the process, the administration usually comes forward and also, follows up with support for the recommendations from the because you have a job of really paying attention to the needs for retention and recruitment. You pay attention to, overall the entire district. And so we're going to do a check and balance here at the end, with the categories within the budget for the various programs. So when you look at, these, now really you're getting down a little bit, but I do think it's important to make sure that we're really satisfied with this sequence, because this is where it becomes more critical, right? Because if there's, now there's $120,000 available. Well, shoot, we do line 16, but we can't quite do line 17. You see the difference there? So, or if there's $200,000 extra available, we can go this much farther into it. So even though right now it looks like this is where the line is drawn, it may change based on what money is actually available from the legislature. So I think that's why your commitment to continuing to make sure you're really satisfied with how these are prioritized, really from here all the way to the end of the document. So I want to, I know we're kind of doing this in these groups. So let's finish with 15 through 21. Is there any different prioritization you would have and how they are currently placed?
So where it says athletic, the row 15 with athletic director stipends added for schools with AP, does that mean without AP? Should that be without?
No, it really, this is
So
correct.
if,
They have them, they already have them for schools that don't have an assistant principal. There are stipends being paid to teachers to perform those responsibilities.
so this is an increased stipend, am I correct?
So this would be adding back. So before we had assistant principals, we had all these stipends that we paid teachers to do some of those responsibilities.
Mm-hmm.
When we added assistant principal budget, we took away some of those stipend opportunities to offset the cost of adding in assistant principals. So what this interest is then is because we are adding to sports programming for this next year. So now we're going back to 2 nights a week or 3 nights a week with games next year.
It's the athletic additions are what we had to reduce. We reduced 4 seasons down to 3 and 1 team per sport. So we basically went from 13 sports down to 6 total sports. So that's going to reinstitute that. In addition to that, it's 1 team per sport going back to 2 teams per sport. So it'll be 4 seasons at a minimum of 2 teams per sport. Volleyball has additional. So that is what that encompasses. The interest is to say that with the reinstitution of a full sports schedule, if you will, there's a need to have a a stipended position designated specifically for the athletic director, similar to what was previously in place.
Do you have a question? No, okay.
Does that answer your question? So there has been confusion about with APs versus without APs. I just wanted, so especially for those people out there doing the athletic director duties right now, thinking, are we talking about taking away that? No, if they're doing them right now, most of the schools, those we're talking about the schools that don't have any support. That'd be like West Star would be an example where you're at. Any other questions or any other recommended changes to the priorities you already made? Connie?
Just bring that over. So I would like to see that the 16-17 were swapped, and just bringing that 50% increase to those teachers versus bringing in a completely new position, I think would it's just support teachers. And especially our top end teachers, we don't want to lose them. And, I think I'm hearing that, they feel disheartened that it's a very small subset of teachers that didn't get a 6% increase. And they're our teachers with longevity. So, showing support to that before we brought in a completely new person to our campuses, I think would just show them our commitment to them.
Other thoughts on that? Do the rest of you support moving that up? So up means you would move it up. I could live with it, or I think it should stay where it is. Show my trigger. Starting over here. You have to participate too. I know you're taking notes. You could live with it.
We're flip-flopping the
That's the recommendation to
flip-flop.
flip-flop. So you can live with that. What do you say? You support it?
I mean, I could live with it. I'm just looking, I know we're only supposed to be looking to 21, but I'm kind of looking on and I just feel like we've moved all of our support that we keep hearing again and again that we need, because it's taking away from other areas. So like the lunch support, and I thought that was gonna be part of that support liaison too. So that's what I have a difficulty with, because we moved all those other ones down too, because there's 27, 28, 29, those are all interests wanting to support someone else or some other body coming in to help with those times instead of taking away. So like I want our top end teachers to say, so like I'm supportive of that, but somehow we need to also get one up there that's gonna help in that area. Because again, even after like we finished our last budget committee meeting, I received an additional 5 emails on my campus just focused around those kind of needs. Oh, Brittany, by the way, we would really like because it just takes from, our reading interventionist who has to go and cover a DB, or a sped person that maybe needs to go and do it, and that makes it really hard to keep your schedule and meet the students' needs, but then also cover duties so that your teachers aren't losing lunch or. So I support I support getting you guys up there, because I think that's important, because honestly, a lot of people are going to leave. I mean, I'm working with someone that made more money than I did as a long-term sub, and she just swapped over to, a teacher certified position, and she's like, how's it possible that I'm making less? And I'm like, hi, welcome to teaching. So it's very hard to honor the teachers that have been here and will continue to be here if we don't make sure. So I'm either, if it keeps them up there.
Renee, I saw you pointing down. Say more.
Use a mic. She already knows the drill.
Yeah, come get the mic. Sorry, I wasn't.
Okay, maybe it's because I'm coming from the perspective of having to work with maintenance and technology and that end of support, and it is very, very dry, and I know you guys get tired of waiting 3 days for us to fix something very simple, and a lot of it is information gathering so we can actually fix it correctly. So having one person on campus that can do that, things will get fixed faster, it'll improve morale for teachers, it'll be better for teachers, so you can get right back to work. That was my intention in that position.
Okay, so you've all heard kind of the yays, the nays, and I can support it. Danae, does anybody want to change their position based on what she said, or? So can you support it, given what the rest of the room is somewhat supporting it? Could you live with it? Okay. All right, so Brittany, you now also, is there anything else?
Well, then Beth, if you will shift 16 and 17. Swap forward to those.
Lori, can I just say something? So I was wondering about 20 and 21, and let me just say why. They're very low cost, 20 and 21. And if we come close to potentially having more money, it may be easier to fund those because they are of low cost. I mean, when I'm looking at them categorically in this category, they are two of the lowest costs in the category. It's just something I wanted to point out when when Dr. Schuff was saying, okay, well, what if we came back and had 120,000 more, right? Is it better to fund more things or just one? And that's just where my mind was going with looking at the cost of those.
I have a question on 21. I'm thinking that their interest was $1,500, but there was no understanding of how many student teachers there would be. So I would expect that this is actually a larger amount. Do you have any sense of how many traditional student teachers we have? Maybe what it was is we didn't have very many of those.
We typically have in between 6 to 10 student teachers over the course of the year. They're split between both semesters, so that could go up to 15,000. I wouldn't anticipate that it would go more than 15,000 if we had 10 student teachers annually.
All right, so Natasha, let's just take one at a time. Line 20, are you recommending that it's in a different placement? Where in this between 1 and its current position of 20?
I mean, I would propose that we move it below the new 17. So can you show me that, Beth? What is 17 now?
17 would be the new placement of 17 would be just below the support liaison.
Mm-hmm.
So line 27 is actually 16. Do you want me to renumber them?
Keep our line numbers so we have something.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I understand that. So I would say to place it below this. Well, this is where I need your help. Do we place it below the support liaison or do we place it above the support liaison?
So I want to clarify as well, like if you get to a number on there and you can't fund that one, do you go to the next one because you're like, ooh, I bet I can fund that one? Or do you just say, nope, and that money just hangs out in our budget for,
Well,
because I guess that would
we
matter.
could try to do that. So an example of these, the support liaison is 122,000. And if, let's say, there wasn't enough money for that, could we, and that would be something I would propose to all of you, should we consider one of the other ones that is model it with a little bit less? This was a pricier version of it. Is there a way to provide some support, at least some support? So let's say, the best way to do this is 2 hours a day. I'm making it up now. And you go, well, it would be some help if you did one for 2 hours a day, and everybody got some level of support. So that's a different way to model it and get it closer to being more likely to fit into the budget. So as we get to some of these, yes, to Natasha's point, for $6,000, we're helping 7 schools and 7 people who are doing a hard job, and pay them maybe more what it's worth. Or is it more important to get new people added? Okay, so you have to propose something. Connie's like, yes, she made me do that last time.
Well, I think that we didn't finish changing this though, right? Because when we talked about the CST, we also said that it would need to be the 504 as well. So wouldn't that change the amount? So that it was equitable, so you weren't just changing, like we kind of talked about this towards the end.
Okay.
So I wasn't sure if we changed that dollar amount to be equitable. Like if we're gonna raise one stipend, then it should be gifted, CST, and 504. So then ideally you're maybe benefiting 3 people per campus, and then that would probably increase that 3 times as much. Is that correct? Like, am I thinking, or did we just not change? I mean, I don't know. I think she's right.
I think you're right.
So that would really change the way that we are looking at that as well.
So then it's not $6,000.
So my understanding is schools with assistant principals, right? There's a number of duties that are split and absorbed, as Dr. Schuff just mentioned, by the assistant principal. It could be the EL coordinator, it could be the 504 coordinator, it could be the CST lead. And based off of the needs of those particular campuses, they have the discretion to select where they might need the additional support. So I don't know that this really is the CST lead as much as it could be the CST lead if there's a high contingency of CST needs that are at a campus. But at another campus where there's a high contingency of 504s, that could be the discretion by which that school uses. So I look at it as at least this amount, right? Because it's not all 3 increased stipended positions. It's one of those high needs positions for additional support for additional staff to get a stipend in at an increased amount. That's how I see that.
So let's play that out. So let's assume that it's 1 position per school that they have the discretion on, correct? And right now it's sitting at $800 times 7 schools, $5,600. So if you were to increase that to $1,000, for example, that's really 200 times 7. So that's $1,400 additional dollars. So this is actually quite a bit of additional funding that then would offset the other schools. So I think you would be approving $6,600, and how the $6,600 equates to those positions. You can come back with very precisely how much that number. That increase from 800 to it's now 950. It's 800 now. It's 1,100. But if you just go ahead and base your prioritization on this figure, because I know they've done the math and the work on it in the past, I just don't have it all here, the backup to see what that is. But we could work with this number, and what we should change, to your point, it would be CST 504,
Or,
gifted, EL.
and could we say that it's a possibility to even be split amongst the 3? Like if they find on their campus it equates kind of equal weighting, or, based on weighting of responsibility, they might even choose to split it 3 ways. I don't know.
Right now, we're going to
Could we leave
agree
that?
on a budget amount,
Yeah.
and I think you're speaking to like what's fair for stipends. That would be a different conversation. Would be back to the board, and maybe or principals may say, "You're right. We have so few 504s, but we got a ton of EL students. What's the fairness of?"
Yeah, I think that should be left to the campus, is what I was saying, because every campus is different in their makeup. So, where you put those funds.
Clear to the person that's making that decision on the campus too, so that there is equity.
So we can't do that because we get stipends approved by the governing board. So that's so once we agree on what the budget amount is, and they agree to the budget, then how stipends are delivered within the budget, that's like a different conversation. And so that jobs weigh in and say, hey, we'd like to do this differently, but it
They were just setting up a budget line to work within, and then how they do it, that's gonna be a different conversation.
Can I clarify, sorry, can I clarify something? What is the stipend for coaches to coach a team? Like if I was coaching girls volleyball?
It's $900 per season right now.
And the stipend for CST for the whole year?
It's $800.
So a discussion in our campus was, I do CSTs all year. A coach coaches for a small portion of the year and makes more. And CSTs, I know coaching takes up a lot of time after school, but the CST leads are putting in a lot of time consistently all through the year, and it feels unbalanced.
I think that may be the foundation upon the recommendation for the budget interest is to augment that to some degree to honor the time that's actually spent.
So I think you're agreeing with that, perhaps it needs to be increased. All right, so we're back to line 20 would now say CST 504 gift to EL lead stipend increase. Total amount we will be working with is $6,600. It looks like it's trying to get it to $1,500, but we'll verify how much money it comes out. We will
Stick with the 6,600 so that we can have an amount that is firm.
Here, Natasha,
And or Brittany, you originally brought this forward.
where do you recommend this is adjusted to in its priority?
I mean, I would probably move it a lot higher, because then I'm pulling out now and looking at how we prioritize gifted EL and reading endorsement as number 9. I mean, put it right below that would probably be my suggestion. Because again, then like we're looking, I mean, I understand that the athletic director stipend is for the schools, to support them to actually have an athletic director. But then again, it might come back to that point of like, why are we prioritizing athletics over the needs of our teachers on campus that are supporting in those educational goals?
Your proposal is moving line number 20, and you want to put that below between 9 and 10. All right, so let's see if there's some support for that or a recommendation for an adjustment.
For just clarification before we do that, is the reason we were more heavily supporting the athletics over the education was partially because of our override, correct? Is that kind of why we were kind of weighting it a little bit more heavily over the top of the academics? I know because we've got we've got 2 things in there for athletics, but I kind of felt like that was part of the reason that we were prioritizing it higher was because of the
one that was for the override was number 3. And then the other one is just to like, and it, I guess, yeah, I guess they kind of do go, because we're increasing.
So
Well, hold on. What you're essentially doing is you're right sizing to before the override was reduced. You're right sizing that back, which did not include athletic directors at all of the schools. So the athletic director is not as related to the override as is the reinstitution of all of those athletic programs and associated coaches that come along with those extra teams.
Okay, so the proposal is to move it between line 9 and 10. Show whether if you're liking that, then
Thumbs up. If your thumbs equal, then you can live with it. Thumbs down, you have a different idea of where it should go. So show me what
you're thinking. Danae's over there with
Sideways down. I'm the one that proposed it, but I like go with whatever you guys are going to tell me to, so.
I don't see, Heather, what are you thinking?
I'm just looking at what's underneath it.
Yes,
before I
good.
give you the-
You should.
Because the increase Liberty instructional coach, that's she's doing 2 jobs right now, right?
Correct.
Correct. So next year, that's gonna be 2 separate people, is that correct?
It'll, provided we can hire for it, it will be, the part-time special areas and, her position to return to being full-time.
But that's a 0 budget.
For her, that's 0, but to increase, further increase to actually make it more hireable, to get somebody, that's the increase, from 0.3 to 0.5. But we also require to put more money into special areas because of our override, right?
So then below 10. Because 11, right, the increased Liberty, the one instructional coach to 0.7 to
That's a
1.0.
0.
That's the one that like, we're gonna find the money, we already found the money somewhere.
So if we put it,
Between 11 and 12, is that your revised suggestion?
if it's between 11 and 12, that's above the line, correct?
Yes.
Then what goes below the line?
Nothing.
Athletic director stipends.
No,
Athletic director stipends.
no, we have 20,000 still budgeted. We're proposing to move 6,000.
So it would still fit athletic.
It would still fit. But I'm wondering if it is prioritized right, maybe it goes right below the athletic director stipend, which we had flipped, correct? So would it go below then the 50%, the top 50%?
Let's look online up here where we can see where it is. So we moved support liaison below paying the 50% compensation.
It's the only one we've heard.
And so if you go up above that to your 26, budget interest is 14,000 for the athletic directors with 20,000 remaining. So yes, you put it just below there, it still is gonna be within.
Can you scroll down just a little? So then if they put it above that, what's not getting funded?
It really is a small amount, it's the same thing as not being funded, that we're already not being funded, it's just squeezing in $6,600. Alright, so are you suggesting that the actual line, not our banker lines, that it would be the 26 is where she'd be placing that? Is that what you're nodding yes?
That's my suggestion.
So, okay, I'm looking around there. Crystal, what do you say? Yes, Danae?
I mean, ultimately,
You're
really
back there, I gotta
doesn't
see you.
change much
So
either,
she didn't-
but just hopefully, like, we can get a few more of those ones, hopefully we're gonna get some.
Okay.
Because that's the one line. Yeah.
Alright, good. This is what, we just wanted to have a little more space. We pushed a lot into that very tail end of that meeting. Okay, we're coming into now, so the stipends for student teachers, I mean, really that's $1,500 to $15,000. When you look at that one, is that still positioned where you want it? Especially now, I want you to, should we leave it alone, see what else is coming up, and then come back to some of those? Okay. Let's look at group 4. These were budget interests, and I was a little taken back when I realized we actually never talked about them. So I was thinking back to how I was facilitating. I said, somebody proposed another budget interest. Did you propose them? And then it was kind of quiet, and it made me think, all right, well, nobody wanted to propose this any higher. But I just wanted to make sure, now that you're seeing these here, 22, 23, 24, they are a little, one of them's a lot higher in price tag. Are any of those any that you would prioritize any higher than anything else we already have here? We just never talked about it.
And both Dave and Norma, are not,
See, we would initially propose them, but.
So I have a question then, considering that we're gonna be doing, the math. Would a math coach be beneficial math coach position be beneficial when rolling out, new material?
We're looking at adopting the
Yeah, which I mean would be, I guess I'm just looking at it from like, I'm in the thick of it. So, you know, you're trying to do LEDC, you're trying to make sure that you're meeting the students' needs, and now we're going to adopt a new resource that we are gonna marry with LEDC, and hopefully it's gonna really be in that way already, so you're not having to piecework stuff together. But maybe having someone that's heavily coached in that area, a stipend position in the sense that whatever is what I'm thinking, right? That person would do, it's still a teacher, but they can have their stipend. So almost like sign up for my PD after school or your math training, and you can use it for your 301 hours or whatever, but then that person's a stipend paid position. It looks like it would save more money. I don't know what that stipend, I guess I can read a little bit more.
Are you looking at line 24?
I'm looking at line 24. Yeah, instructional.
Yeah, so I was just wondering, but, you know, if we put too many coaching positions in place, then what is our coach that we've already got on campus? What's, you know, their responsibility? But I would see them kind of taking that on, but I would be more interested in seeing somebody at an interventionist before I would a coach, just because they actually touch the kids. And, you know, I think teachers are crying for support for their students because varied reasons, obviously, you know, from, you know, students that have, you know, significant needs that they're just not able to meet in the classroom, through, you know, because I really think like the coaching position definitely, you know, could filter through our coach's job. So that was just my thinking.
I will say, can't afford line 23, because if you are set,
If you are prioritizing 3% salary increases, you only have 340,000 left entirely to work with. So nothing else
would be prioritized higher than that. So, you know,
would be a consideration for line 3.
But then even line 22, wasn't this only written as one?
It was written as
1,
And so then we need 7.
yeah, so it's not affordable. So
This is an example, the one that Norma submitted. At a larger
school, when you look at how the dollars, you know, it was one of the documents we looked at early on, where we said how much is essentially generated by school, by the enrollment, and then what are the positions you have in there, and then, you know, have we overstaffed
the school, so we're not breaking even, for example. So for example,
Liberty's very small, so we don't break even. So we have to be really careful how much staffing, if we increase things, you know, more than half time for some of those things, because
school. On the other hand, Blue Horizons has kind of got similar staffing to schools that are much smaller, and frankly, it probably deserves a little more support than a 1.0 instructional coach, or, you know, let's say it's a 1.0 reading interventionist, because they're so big. You know, they've got 5 sections, K-1-2, they've got 15 classes. That is more
than Liberty Elementary, if you're not counting preschool. So all that's to say is,
there is a rationale. You could say one school as a Title I school, and it's large. So that could be a rationale.
but I agree with you. I don't see how we can do it for 7 schools.
And like, just to piggyback off your interventionist, like, if we could have an interventionist, it would be a PC, just because the difference that we are seeing in our K-3, because we have a reading interventionist, is that we need to like have one for math too. But then it just stinks that once they get to 4th grade, then there's nothing. Like, because there's still a huge need, so. We need 11. I mean, I always do.
I'm okay with leaving those positioned the way they are in that section.
She says, no, not when words are monitor. No, but yes, that's Okay, all right, I just wanted to give it its due conversation, because I felt bad that we hadn't ever had a conversation around that. All right, so then, the ones that come up next, okay, we may need to see these on the screen because you can't see the color connections to these things. Line 25 from Tony and teacher salary, I think we addressed that with the 1% plus the 2%. Line 26, we addressed that, the board has already addressed that with the 15 years, and I think the committee, if you are still satisfied with that, we'll wait till next year to see what the actual impact of that was and what was the cost associated with it, and would that be worthwhile to come back and look at that next time. Now, when you're looking at 27 to 29 to Brittany's, when you go back and look at the liaison one that currently is below the line, does the committee have any interest in adjusting this or swapping it out with a higher priority with one of the ones that's less expensive or even some other variation? Or do you prefer to leave support liaisons just like it is and leave these down below the line? So you're comparing line 27, 28, 29 with number 16.
Okay, 28, line 28 is a lower amount than 16 and would provide support for what I hear you all saying about teachers, reading interventionists, special education teachers having to cover duty. Now, I don't know that it would fully support all duties, but it may be a form of support that would help. And it's half the cost.
Those are the duties that take away from opportunity for those people to actually work with students, because that's a duty during the workday. I think teachers aren't opposed ever to their before and after school. I don't think that's that was what that was implying. It was just definitely giving that opportunity to those people to be able to work directly with students. So I would be okay with moving that. However, Denise, you might not be as happy because that would not tackle any of your needs. So that would be my only thought. If we were blending one versus.
May I ask who calculated the amount, whoever calculated the amount, what is the difference? Are they gonna get paid more as a supervisor in comparison to an aide?
I think they really probably should all say the same thing. Title is how it's calculated by how many people and how many hours.
Okay.
So I think that's a good clarification for the public.
One, it looks like 7, so 1 per school. The other one is 9, so 2 at the larger school. The thing I worry about these positions is that they're only 3 hours per day. That's really hard to hire somebody who only works 3 hours a day, which I think is why we put these down lower.
Which again makes sense when we put that support liaison in place, because they could possibly be a full-time position.
We have been successful with paraprofessionals working less than 7 hours. This is one I struggle with because it's been on the committee every year I've been here, and it always ends up being pushed down because everybody is the just great hearts, they wanted to go things directly support kids. Lately we've been trying to do more for compensation. So it's always it always becomes pushed down, which it may still be this time. But I wonder if putting some to it versus the larger amount, and then it becomes the onus on the principal for hiring, if they really need the support, maybe some of these places that have volunteers, like, great, come in and volunteer, but we'll also volunteer to do these 3 hours, and maybe they would be able to get somebody. So I know it's a harder to fill position, but I hesitate to say, let's not do support because we think it's hard to fill.
Because if we go back to, like, for instance, our school is ginormous. So if we go back to the fact that, like, our reading interventionists and our reading care are being pulled to do duties, and they already are working with 15 more than 15 classes to try to help their readers, that makes it really hard to even want to stay in there. Like,
if they have a lunch and then they do get a prep and then they also do a duty, that nets now 3 of the 11 periods a day that aren't with kids. All right, so what would you like to do? What would you propose? We have the liaison position. It's
Pretty high up there, so if there's some extra money, there's a chance that we can fund it. You want to
I have a question again about line 28. So I know that we said 3 hours, but were we thinking on a 4-day schedule? So maybe we say it's 4 hours because we're only a 4-day week next year.
Can you see in the calculations at all of that?
No, it's just 6,700 times 9.
So the 6,700 came from,
Just the note.
I think if I remember correctly, we used the lowest
Support staff
level to calculate the 3 hours times the 9, I think. Does that work? Does that math work? But I just remember we talked about that. And,
Right.
Yeah, and so then the days per week, I'm not sure if that got equated.
The lowest pay rate, 3 hours a day for 185 person is 7,500.
So it's actual school days. So if you actually wanted to get a more accurate representation of that, you would take level 1 on the support staff wage schedule times 3 times 148. And then you would multiply that, huh?
it was 3 hours.
It was 3 hours. I think 3 hours is bookending a little bit before and after lunches. The size, Blue Horizons lunch might run 3 hours. Okay, so there's maybe a justification for adding some additional time or additional personnel to the schools that are above 750 kids. Right. I think that's exactly what that means. But that budget isn't quite that much because you're only running 148 days. But to the Crystal's point about hiring somebody for 3 hours a day just for that, it has become increasingly difficult to hire somebody even at 0.75. So that is the consideration for the more full-time job, just out of the ease of getting people who are interested in doing the work. And it's not intended to add some additional components to this per se, but if you wanted to add additional budget to kind of come between the liaison and the lunch duty person, you could creatively find ways to get that person up to 4.5 hours per day. It would require them doing kind of more of a split schedule, but there's also been lots of interest over the past several years to have crosswalk duty aides that we train, which is 30 minutes before school. And you could add 15 minutes or 20 minutes after school for after school. It makes their schedule real choppy, but you're getting it to something that's closer to a 0.5 than a 0.2 or 0.25. So just some consideration.
I've had positions just like that at my school, and sometimes I was able to hire the person that would do before school, after school, and lunch, and sometimes I got
retired guy, they said, oh, no, I'm only coming in for the lunch money. That's great. That's great. I'll forego the support, but I got you here where I need you. I might not hire somebody for the full amount of hours, but I have the budget available. So we can remodel, exactly how many hours or days we can do the back end of that. I think what we just need to work with what's a dollar amount. Now at this point, if you want to work with this $45,000 mark, do you want to work with this $60,000 mark? Here was 119, and the liaison was 122.4. So you can see where it's more people or more hours. What is your priority in getting like something funded, or any particular thing that's going to be most likely to work well, have it be a full-time, or not at all, or something? Can you hear the difference of how we prioritize this?
So I'm wondering if it's hard to hire people for a 0.75 position if we decide to do like 3 hours and those positions sit there unfilled. That's not helpful. But what is the likelihood if we make it a full-time position that it's going to get funded?
Yeah, one and a half the other.
Red or black?
So,
Red or black?
yeah. So no, I'm wondering. I'm sorry, I had to step out. You said that it would be 3 hours, right, for a lunch, even with the 4-day school week. About 3 hours for lunch, and the dollar amount that's there is correct for one per school for 3 hours.
We'll have to go back. It's been, when Connie worked on this and whoever supported her with it, for one, we'll just have to go back in and recheck it and see what the backup math on that was. If it comes out to be a little bit more, a little bit less, we'll check it. When we take it back to the governing board, they'll see where that is. But if you will put in there where you want to prioritize this.
All right, I'll make a suggestion, because ideally I would really love a support liaison. Because that would cover all of it. It would give us everything that we need, a full-time person, and cover lunches, and it would support our tech department, and I think that's great. But because that's a larger dollar amount, can we just move 28 to right under support liaison? So then if support liaison cannot be, because I'm right, and whoever wants to be prayed to, that we're gonna get more money. And if it can't be covered, but we could cover the lunch person, then it would drop down for the lunch person.
All right, so I hear you saying that, watch us talking to me. I hear you saying that you would like to almost put them pairs and say, whichever one is, they're both a priority, whichever one, there's enough budget for it, that would work. Okay, I think that will work. We have a couple more things we have to get to. And if at the end, that's where we end, at the end of the prioritization of ones you'd want to move forward, then I think that can work.
Or can I ask her a question? Because you were the understander of this. The support liaison, when this was calculated, was this for 4 days too?
I think they all work because we'd already approved 4-day week by that time. Oh, they're shaking their head no.
It was for 40 hours regardless.
So what if instead of 40 hours, they worked 30 hours?
There you go.
And then they could still do their job. I would love to have a 1 hour less day, or like 2 hour, however that figures, I can't count. But maybe I want to be a support liaison. Wait, every Friday.
Well, if they lower it to where like the bus drivers only have to work 30 hours in order to get benefits, if the support liaison also had that availability, that might make it more attractive for hiring.
That raises the dollar amount. We're going to have to pay them.
We have to stay at like.
Yeah, you have to stay under benefits.
Yeah, and the other part of the support liaison was, I believe we had it at a level 3 for them to be a little bit more computer savvy, because we are moving more technology driven as far as managing all of our work order systems and things like that. And there's communication skills that come through digitally. It requires a little bit more skill level than your average custodian. So that was also part of it.
All right, Beth, are you in the background there running some numbers?
So for the support liaison that we put in there, there's the formula. She is correct, we did a level 3 to find somebody with a little bit of experience with the technology and maintenance side of it. And I did 148 days at 8 hours a day. So if we're adjusting that, it'll be an easy calculation.
Can we adjust that down to see what happens at a 7-hour day? 'Cause
Sure.
that's closer to school day? Even at 7 hours a day for 4 days?
Mm-mm.
That's 20, no.
Is it still 148 days, Jason? Okay.
So we're prioritizing 27 hours to qualify for benefits, right?
I think we were able to back away from that because all of the staff, we didn't end up in a position where we were going to take away benefits from staff.
Okay.
That's correct. Yeah, the way we were able to right size the salary for many employees, it wasn't going to impact the people who currently aren't eligible for benefits wouldn't all of a sudden become eligible for benefits. The people who would have been reduced to something that where this would have been a priority that we needed to do ended up not having to have that happen when we right sized them. I'll just say something for consideration. Many times when we're hiring support staff personnel, one of the things that is the caveat for them to become employed with us is benefits. It's not that much really in the grand scheme of an overall budget to add one additional person for the bang for the buck you're going to get for the support you get for that. So it's very similar to hiring somebody at 0.3. If I hire somebody at 0.72 without benefits because I'm getting under this threshold, there's really not much incentive to do the job. It's just these are the hiring parameters, restrictions that we have now more so than ever. So I, as somebody who's in charge of benefits, would say offer them the benefits and give them 30 hours a week. Well, the benefits package per employee is roughly right around $8,000 per that we as a district provide in addition. The way we've built out the calendars isn't exactly 148 days for support staff. So like our bus drivers are on 155 because they work, 3 or 4 days before. They need to prep. They can't just show up the first day of school, fire up a bus and be ready to roll. They have some, all of our support staff have some additional training, nurses, school secretaries, et cetera. So this person would likely need to work one of our established calendars of 155. It's still a reduction from this price because you're assuming that they would work 12 months. Is that what it was? So if you take them to 10 and a half months, we could reduce that pretty significantly.
All right, so do you want to throw up that calculation up there again, Beth? There on the screen.
Yep. So this calculation is for 148 days at 7 hours a day for 7 campuses.
I mean, they're
That's-
primarily doing duties. I struggle to say what's the meaningful work to add additional days beyond that, unless you really just can't fit them into another work calendar. You don't want to create another work calendar for them, but if we can.
Well, if it's a support liaison though, if it stays under support liaison, they are not just doing duties and they would be.
They could be helping in the front office.
For
Okay.
the digital inquiry and paid. But an entire summer work? I'm just. No, okay, no, I'm saying 5 days. Oh, okay.
So it's the same as like what the school secretaries do for like a week or 2 weeks before school starts?
Or maybe it's 4
Just a few days.
5 days.
School secretaries is just, it's not very much beyond what the calendar is.
Maybe it's during return teachers.
All right. So Beth is going to adjust the dollar amount on the support liaison. Brittany is recommending that we move the other one right next underneath it. It's kind of like an or situation. We will color them in some way for other people to understand that that's an or, depending on what the budget that's available. Is that okay? Okay. And tell me again, which line you wanted her to move right? Line 16 for support liaison? Line 28?
Yeah.
And you're gonna double check the dollars on that one as well. So we'll make sure have clarity there. So you move line 28 right underneath line 16. Remember saying that properly? 16 and 28 are kind of paired, merged.
So when you present that to the board, is that part of the presentation?
They're gonna ask.
What is she talking
What's the difference between these two?
All right. Now, when I go through, the rest of them are all duplications with something else that we already priced higher up. Other than Champs, that was a big price tag. You had said no. Bond project one, that's really not an M&O one. We probably should take it out, but we can show that we've had a conversation about it. Now, I would get into some, when I compared it to the multi-year and the by category, I saw that we were missing a couple of things. Let me just say right off the top, line 38, I think we're deleting because Jason worked again one more time to try to how to right size these employees so they wouldn't take a loss in their hours. So we worked to figure out something to come back and how we can take that budget savings and augment them. So I think there's a way to do that, and that's no additional budget cost. So that's why there's no cost here, so you can really draw a line through line 38. Line 36, we realized that we have a preschool coordinator responsible for the whole preschool program, but the grant for that expires. So we did some creative looking at whether our other grant opportunities for funding, and we're essentially short 15% of that. And so we are needing $24,000 for that position. And then also for growth, when we looked at our enrollment growth, we need, I believe it was another 0.8 driver for transportation for increased routes with our increased enrollment, and that had a cost of $30,734. So those are two budget interests that I want to come back and prioritize with everything else. Sorry.
So those are cost names. 136
Yeah,
and 37.
Like they're required, right? So don't they have to happen, or we're like, sorry, you can't come to.
All right, so
Bristol
when
today.
we say what happens if you don't hire if you don't leave budget for growth for the bus drivers, kind of like what happens if you don't leave budget for an extra teacher for our growth, because we put growth positions in our fixed costs. In that case, you are you're going over. You can't hold to that. I don't think you can go over a bus.
I was gonna say.
Bus driver.
No.
Then what we may have to look at, if we have to stay within that budget, then the other way you go back to maintain that transportation budget is then maybe you say instead of 1 mile as the crow flies, it's 1.25 miles as the crow flies, and less kids qualify for bus services to come. So there is a way to stay within our transportation budget, but it has a different impact. It has a different negative impact if we don't add it for growth. Would you like to say something else?
Yeah, that would be the one thing. The only other component that you would consider would be altering school start times so that your available drivers that you have are able to make double and sometimes triple runs. So there's two ways to solve that problem. You change an entire start time by 45 minutes to accommodate drivers to be able to get there to those routes, or you change the distance by which people would. Well, it depends on what your priority is. If your priority is to be able to provide transportation to kids, you work them as it's 1 or 2 drivers, maybe with a little bit of an additional overtime. But by comparison with increasing the radius, those are your consequences. They just are of not having the right amount of drivers.
But didn't we have, when Las Brisas was at a later start, didn't that create like a waterfall of things with athletics? And
It created a waterfall of things with all kinds of things. Yeah, athletics was one because we don't have lights for fields, so they couldn't start a game at 5 o'clock.
that gets out at 2:40 in Las Brisas who got about at 4:15.
4:15.
Our kids were.
Waiting. Yeah.
And they couldn't do field trips anytime, they didn't get back before.
2:30.
1 o'clock.
Yeah, you go to a field trip and you have to be back. Be back by 12:30.
Is there just out of curiosity, the preschool coordinator, is that able to be absorbed in some other administrator's position? Just out of curiosity.
Student services line 5, and I'm unsure of what all that entails. Is there?
The student support director of support services, line 5. What's your question on it?
Could the preschool be absorbed in that?
I do not think so.
So it's
I don't know
a
what it all
full-time.
entails, that's why I'm asking.
She runs the preschool at Liberty and does all the compliance and does everything for preschool for full-time job right now.
And runs the grants.
So are there other grants that person runs then? Is that what you're saying? There's other grants that person runs?
First things first,
Okay.
grants. I mean, full compliance at first things
Yeah.
first.
All the
Okay.
licensing, all the hiring, all the parent issues.
And like, so she's a physician, she was once paid by a grant, now we aren't gonna have that grant anymore. That's my, okay.
And that's her salary? Or
That's
is that like,
15% for.
oh, okay.
We
Gotcha.
were creative in looking for other sources with other things that we could put towards it that would qualify to be able to do that. So it wasn't putting a whole position back into the budget. So it's 15% that we're struggling to locate.
It's a split funded position in multiple.
Yeah.
Workplaces.
For this next year, is there any opportunity to put it into ESSER? I know we're pretty lean on that. All right, let's start with transportation. Where do you want to prioritize that?
Can I ask a question? So for the additional growth, we've already kind of, when we came up with this expected budget, we already accounted for that additional growth, but that's like what our main amount, right, we started with, because you get paid, right?
In our growth projections for support staff, we mirror a similar formula to transportation bus driver staff as we do teachers. So those are built in based off of that. This is just based off of our growth going a little higher and a little faster than what we're able to keep up with. Yes, and with the increased number of routes that are now required, with this area getting busier, it's not just as simple as walking across a crosswalk on Dean Road anymore. That's a major road, right? So now there's major cross streets that we are required to transport. Just lots of factors there.
Well, that's a safety priority for me, and I don't know how many of you have traveled to Blue Horizons, but I know that it's only a mile, but like our school is not safe at all, even though people that live like 2 blocks from our school should be bused because they only have a sidewalk on one side of the street, and so kids cross the street and there's no walking path on the other side. So I would be very concerned to hear that now, oh, we won't take you 1.25 miles, and you're gonna be maybe possibly having to be in a very unsafe position. So I would like to see this prioritized. I would like to see it covered in some way. I don't know where it should go, because I feel like everything else is important too, but we absolutely do not want a student walking home and then being hit by a car because we couldn't figure it out in our budget to keep them safe.
All right.
Yeah, it just absolutely, you're not going to.
Give us a line number.
Okay, I have a question with the additional transportation growth. Does that even out when we add a school, the need for that driver? Does it even out with the budget with being a new school built and the new routes for that?
So
Look on page 3 of the by program area for transportation.
Bus driver positions, you'll see a little bit added each year for growth. Just like we have positions adding a little bit each year for growth. The only reasons we weren't prioritizing our teaching positions is because with the override, you know, we're limited. Some of these other ideas we have that are great ideas, we wouldn't be able to spend our additional dollars on that. We have to spend it on override protected things. So in this case, transportation isn't, but the extra teaching positions are protected with the override dollars that we need to spend, you know, the $1 million or so on the override.
Danae, to answer your question more specifically, anytime you build a new school, your budget doesn't catch up to it, not initially. So that is across all staffing, that is across everything, because you have an influx of new staffing and not necessarily the influx of new enrollment right away. Right? You just have the need to build another
Couple
school.
years to catch back up.
It takes a little bit. So to answer your question, it never catches up right away.
Okay.
All right, where are we moving transportation? Or are we leaving it where it is?
Everyone might want to kill me across the entire district, but if these are, I mean, obviously, these are very important. So what if instead of a 1% additional salary increase, because we are getting our 2% additional salary increase, what if that changed to a 0.75% salary increase? I know, please don't kill me. But then that would give a little bit more money to be able to cover these, and then they can just go right up to the top because they're very important.
Okay, somebody else say something about that.
I want more money, honestly. I want to be able to be paid more, but.
I would say that instead of giving pay increases to intervention and instructional coach, that those are more prioritized. But I don't see taking the 0.25 away, because we're trying to bring up our bottom salary, and that would help bring that, and that's going to attract teachers. So that kind of, I mean, it's not a lot, Brittany, by any means, but I'm just thinking out loud on, that goes across all things, right? And this goes across very few things. The increase on 7 and 8. So that's what.
So you'd put it above those, like at the number 6 spot, after 6?
Yes. I'm just thinking.
Were you thinking both of them? Transportation and.
Yeah, I mean, if we can't deal without having, somebody else absorb those responsibilities if there's not a way to do that. And we already have her set in place, is my understanding. We don't want to lose her. So it's not like it's a new position. We just have to figure out how to pay for her entire position, correct?
I would agree with her.
All right, so am I hearing putting the preschool coordinator like after line 3 before any other new positions are added? Is that what you're thinking? Or what were you actually saying, Connie?
No, after 6.
After
Yep,
6.
between
Okay.
6 and 7. It
So-
still totally get covered, but
Preschool coordinator goes after 6, and what about transportation? Same together?
I think you almost have to. It's a need, not a want.
Okay.
And then I see those 7 and 8. I almost see as those are wants, not a need.
So should they move somewhere?
I was feeling that way because I feel like if you go based on wants and needs, and you kind of look at each item based on wants and needs, it changes the way you're thinking. And I just.
Well, that would be true for 9, 10, 11. Those are all just ones. Correct.
I just started kind of thinking of wants and needs when I was looking at, well, we need them, and it's not a want. We need them. And so if we're pushing that, and then we begin thinking wants and needs for everything else on this list, it does kind of change.
Maybe they insert in between 6 and everything else stays the same way you've prioritized it? Or is there anything else you'd be suggesting gets prioritized differently from 7 beyond?
I think the insert works.
Okay. Jimmy, show me, looking around the room, I heard some yeses over here. Heather? Okay, all right. You guys are doing some hard work. Thank you.
Yeah, could we see it? I think that's what we could do, but I'd like to know. I'm sorry, I know you're over there moving a whole lot around.
There's the insert right there. So 36 and 37 are below 6. And you're good until right there.
Can you scroll down so we can see what fell off?
We just lost a bunch of.
So then we lost the PE from 23 to 25.
We had one more idea up our sleeve. If we can use some indirect costs, we haven't fleshed this idea fully out, but is it possible to delete the business service thing and try to do that through indirect costs? And is that safe enough to do on an ongoing basis? Those are one-time dollars.
One time in that you have grants every year, and so it continues with your grants every year.
Okay. All right, so you like it when I say something doesn't cost 0, right? You didn't like the ones where I actually came back with money. So we are trying to be creative also, and we were thinking that line 6, that we could zero that out and use indirect costs to pay for that. And then I'm going to save that dollar amount. Well, we'll just work on that later. I think we'll come back with a proposal to do that differently, and that would free up $18,000. So now, what does it say?
So line 10 says required for override, and even with $18,000, we can't cover that, correct?
So, I mean, I probably should just say override, and I think what we will have to do is when you've got this, there's 2 ways we're going to check this. We're going to check it up against these categories. Always go against what, the category that budgets say we can or can't do, but I just want you to be aware of that. Then the other way she's going to test it is she's going to, out of all these things that we can actually attribute to an override approved expenditure, because we have to spend a certain amount of this money in override functions. And if we haven't, that automatically is going to push something like this up above, let's say, reading endorsements, because we have to spend money on the override purposes. So just know that we can leave this right where it is, but if we haven't met that threshold, we're going to have to push that one up. Does that make sense? Okay.
And you'll be clear about that, like, right? Okay, because I try to be as clear as possible when I take it back. Like people that don't sit here and listen, that they don't have the same understanding and the same struggle that we're going through right now to try to make the best choice.
Connie, do you want to add something?
Yeah. So as we're thinking about that and we're kind of throwing these things out. So again, like wants and needs, so when I look at line 9, gifted Yale reading endorsements, some of these are things that we've asked our teachers to go out and get to support students and so on and so forth. They're not asking for an increase per se. And I was just thinking if we push that up above 7, so 9 above 7, and I hate to say it, but 7, 8, and 9 drop under the threshold to keep the line 10 whole.
So you're saying
10 above 7 to make sure that for sure happens, is what you're saying?
Yeah, and possibly. I mean, my justification. Yeah, 9 and 10 above 7 and 8. If we just exchange those two, I think, do we get pretty close now to balance?
Sorry, I have to reduce this so I can see it.
Yeah.
So you want 9 and 10 above 7 and 8?
let's see what we think about that. absolutely.
It just in my head. So, okay, we want this because it's required for the override, right? Number 10. So that was my thinking. We got to get that up there a little bit, right? And I was thinking, okay, pay increases are nice. I'm not saying they're not, but I'm saying the difference between offering somebody some more additional pay for intervention, and coach is different than offering stipends for gifted EL and reading endorsements, because those are something somebody went out and they actually had to spend money on, possibly depending on where you went through to get it, and or additional requirements to meet the needs to get those endorsements. That was an additional cost to somebody at some point in their career, time-wise or whatever. So I was just feeling like we need to honor that over the top of pay increase, for example. But that was my thinking. But
Okay.
let me hear from everybody else.
Anybody else?
I want to be clear about my understanding of gifted EL and reading endorsements. If they were a coach, so with this new budget interest here, if they were also a coach, or even if the reading interventionist had an EL or endorsement, would they get the stipend to them?
We ran an analysis for every single one of our teachers.
So whether they were
If they have an endorsement, the proposal is to honor that endorsement regardless of whether they're teaching it or not.
then I would like to do what she said. 9 and 10 and up 7.
Danae, do you support that? Crystal?
Yes.
Okay, so we're going to move. Yes, go ahead. You haven't, no. You think no, so say more.
Okay, so I think one of the reasons for both of these being on here was to develop our leadership succession plan. And we are asking these people to do more and more in their position, and we are not compensating them.
Okay, so I'll piggyback off of that. You're asking people with these endorsements to do more and more because they have the endorsement too. So I can honor that and I respect that part too. But then you're asking a teacher to do more because of the endorsements that they hold as well. So I
They're getting
understand
them
your
paid right
point.
now, if they're already getting paid for their endorsements, if they're using them and they're working with kids, they are getting paid. This would be an example of somebody who's a math teacher in 6th grade and doesn't have any EL students but has the EL endorsement. They would start to get that EL endorsement regardless of whether they were doing any EL kids.
So during the year, sometimes we unexpectedly get these kids in our classroom too. So we can't say for sure if these kids accidentally end up in their room either until they're there. So,
But it's eliminating what this does is this eliminates the current requirement for you to have a roster of students or of students to actually get paid for the endorsement that you received. The intent behind this is to encourage people to continue to get endorsements and get compensated accordingly, because the value that is provided by getting these continued endorsements provides additional value to the educational experience for kids, regardless of whether you're teaching them or not. I think to Natasha's point, and I don't adamantly disagree, I'm just simply saying, when we're asking everybody to do more, okay? I mean, let's not kid ourselves. Everybody is doing more, and we are trying to honor that through a variety of compensation components throughout this entire piece, right? But when you're asking folks to develop as leaders, if you'll recall, just a short 5 years ago when we did not have assistant principals, we had to have our administrators go elsewhere to get the experience required to become an assistant principal. With all of our growth and the planning that has occurred, we've built these pipelines for leadership. And without these compensation components and increments towards these pipelines for leadership, there's no real incentive, compensation-wise, to take on those additional roles and duties and responsibilities that we're asking. It's simply a leadership and succession pipeline. That's the intent behind that part.
So I can hear a philosophical difference of, you can hear this and go, yep, I support that, and you hear this and I support that. Ultimately, we just have to say where are we going to put it. So you want to weigh in, Brittany?
I don't know, I think I'm gonna process for a few seconds before I open my mouth again.
So, question, would it be reasonable maybe to change the amount of the stipends that are the compensation? Would it be reasonable to maybe make some adjustments? It says 5% increase in pay. And I just say this because, pretty much everybody got a 3% increase in pay just recently too. So this is additional above that. So we're almost like 8%, 9%, 10%, depending on where they were in that spectrum of, being a coach, being the coach. Like if you came in and you had 4 years, 5 years experience, which we have some of those coaches on our campuses. So if they have that and they got 3,000 plus whatever this 5%, they could have potentially had a very significant raise at that point. So I'm just thinking, can we adjust the 5% to maybe be a 3%? Would that help bring that down and then be able to move some of that up? I don't know. That's just a suggestion.
Because they also still get the 3% anyways, the 2% overall plus the 1%. I mean, I think I brought this up when we did the budget committee before, because it says on here that we talked about maybe changing it to a 4% and then we decided to keep it at a 5% for the instructional coach. I get what you're saying, like, I can totally agree with that. I know we have to support leadership and the growth, but like, if we only support them and then we look at our people that are down lower and they're like, forget you, we're gonna go somewhere else because they're not maybe feeling supported by their leadership anyways, or,
Yeah, Brittany, all of these things have consequences. I think to have just a clear understanding of the rationale behind it, we'll get behind and support. I think our goal is to get behind and support all of it so that where we can make it work, we absolutely will. It's just so everybody clearly understands what that philosophy is. It's not a positional statement. When I was asked to support it or not, I support it because I'm trying to build succession pipelines for people to grow within our organization and not have to work so much to find people from outside of it.
Show us where our bottom line is and how much we're off by, Beth, if you can. I think your proposal is saying, is there anything we could adjust in these dollar amounts? Just she'll get to the bottom line. Let's just see how far off we are. So here we're off by $1,800. Right? If you're trying to get to line 10. So I honestly would say, I would say we can sharpen the pencil and maybe make that a little bit smaller, a 4%. Remember when we did the 4%, it was like a difference of, I don't remember what it was, but it was really nominal. It was like $450. It was something really small. But we could do that, or we could just say, here's our prioritized order, because now when we're talking $1,800 in a budget with multi-millions of dollars, that's practically zero, right? It's not so much will we find it, but when the board looks at this, one of the things that they'll be looking at also is, if they see some things that below the line, that is an opportunity, and I've recommended to the board in the past that maybe we start to look at some reserve funds, and now we'll have to use those reserve funds for that same thing for maybe 3 years, because we're not going to see growth for 3 years. So you'd have to have 3 times that amount available. So for example, if the board said, hey, I'm really stuck on, I want it to be a 4% increase for staff, and they said, I said, well, I don't think the budget committee is recommending it because they feel really strong the rest in here. But I could say, if you want to get to 4%, you can then go look at using reserve carry forward funds. It has its own set of consequences, just like anything else. But so I think what's really most important here, I think we're doing a really good job grappling to get what we want above the line. But I think really it's more about your prioritization. And then it's going to be up to them to say, are they going to use some of those additional funds to make some of these other things happen, or not? But let's take Connie's idea and say, you know, if they were modeled, just note, can you repeat the exercise if it was modeled at 4% or was modeled at 3%? What's that difference in the amount? And then while she's doing that, you all just take a final look over of everything else, because I think you may have accomplished your task.
May not be totally on topic for this, but where do the funds from the public surplus, do they get added to this pot or do they go somewhere else? And we can't consider that money.
It was, again, that's going to be one time. So all of this money is money that goes, that now it's in the budget for the very next year, the very next year, the very next year. So surplus money
Would be a one-time thing.
it's a one-time thing. So we can do some of those one-time expenses, like buy some additional capital expense with it, you know, buy some replacement furniture. While let's give her a little think time without putting pressure on her. I want you to shift your attention here to, we've got to wrap it up here. Just as I'll have to look to see if we plugged anything else in here that's not here. But I just wanted you to see, when you look at, go to like kind of the second lockdown, program instruction. 58%, 58 to 60% is where we're always aiming for how much we'd spend on our additional money on instruction. And in this model, we're spending about 68%. That's not surprising because we reduced this last year with all the override, and all of those override cuts came out of here. So it's not surprising that our increase is up here at 68. So I don't think of that as a bad thing. Whenever we're putting money to instruction, I think we should pat ourselves on the back. Student support, and that included the 10% for instructional coach, the 5% for reading interventionists. Then student support, we're aiming for 4%, and in this case, we hit 4%. So it's just showing you that the additional support positions that you added, it's coming in line with how we try to categorize our budget and keep our priorities to instruction. Instructional support, we're aiming for 7%. We only have categorized 5%, which is fine because we put more to instruction. General administration, we put 2%. We're a little above that at 3%, but you can see it's only by like about $20,000. So it's in the scope of a multi-million-dollar budget. It is not going to change to higher percentage towards administration, particularly when we look at the very next one down, another administrative cost at 6%, and we really are actually categorizing at 3%. So you can see that starting to right-size this other one. And the same thing with central business, tech, and HR, which is also administrative costs. We're aiming for 4%. Here in this case, we're only spending 3%. You follow that down, plant maintenance at 12%. Again, 9%. We're still making up all those extra money that we've put towards instruction. Transportation at 7%. Budget is modeling at 6%. So I would say what you did as a budget committee is you budgeted the highest priority things that were needed for growth for the district responsibly, and really kind of underspent in those program areas and put that priority towards instruction. So, I think that works. And then I wanted you to see that with all of this together, we're about, $2,000 short, which we're kind of trying to find about that much up here. So that makes sense. When you look across and you see some of these growth positions in just for growth over time, and with the adding of a new school, we are over budget in the next 2 years. That's to be expected with the increase of a new school. And we believe we have carry forward and one-time funds that would be used to right-size that. In the past, governing boards have, I think when Connie was on the board, they authorized up to $500,000 for some additional things that would help the district function well. And we ended up not using that because we didn't use all of our budget within the same year. All the supply money didn't get spent or things like that. So what we found over time is we budget right up to it. We do a good job of being conservative, and we can probably end up right-sizing some of these as well. But we have to start out knowing full well that a new school is going to be problematic. That's hard. So when you see it by category, does that make you want to change or adjust anything else, or are you feeling confident after now seeing the budget by category? Also, if you were to see next year's budget, the total pie of all expenditures, I think you'll see it pretty much the way it has been the last couple of years, where 70% of it's spent on instruction support, and student support, and 30% to the rest of the operations. I think you would still see it staying in line with that. So even though it looks like maybe transportation is less, it's still going to be, when you look at the whole budget, transportation will still be right there within the total budget. Same with maintenance and some of these others. There's such marginal amounts of differences. Questions, comments, suggestions?
I just have a clarifying question, because when you spoke about the teacher instructional coach increase, you said 10%. And then I was just reading the little blurb again. Is it a 5% for them or a 10%? Because in one of the sections it says 5% and the other one it says 10%.
What is on there is 5% for reading interventionist and 10% for instructional coaches.
Okay, so maybe in that little blurb where it says that it's from
Oh.
it's written incorrectly, so if that stays, it just might be misleading to anybody that's reading.
You know what, that should have gone in the reading interventionist one. Thank you for that correction. $5% for reading interventionists and 10% for coaches. Okay, so I think we still have one final thing on the table. Beth, you were doing some math in the background. Is there any adjustment for line 7 and 8?
Yeah, so line 7, what I did is I took it down instead of the 5%, and I took it down to 2%. Easier to calculate at this point in time. And that reduced it from the 16,625 to 8,300, so about half. And then line 8, which is for the instructional coach, I did the, instead of 10%, I did 5, so it brought it down from 37,000 to 18,000, a little more than 18,000.
So you were looking to find 2,000. Are you interested in taking it that much lower, or are you only interested in trying to find $2,000?
So what this did is it allowed us to take this all the way down to there, so we could get in the
To line 20.
20.
Can we see what else moved? Can we scroll up just a little bit?
Sure.
Can I just add for the group, think about a 2% for you or for anybody, 2%. Just think about the intent of the line. I mean, if you're looking for $2,000, I don't know that you cut those both in half. Just saying.
I was thinking that, because I guess I just misheard earlier, I thought it was a 5% for reading interventionist and a 5% for coach. So what if we left reading interventionist at 5% and then we left coach at 5% right now and then looked at the amount with that? So bump that number back up to the 16,625 for reading interventionist. I mean, that's still a lot less, because it was 5,300 for instructional coach for the 10%, so it would only be half of that, so 2,600, right?
Yeah, 2,650.
I mean, still a little bit.
Okay. What was the original thinking of 5% versus 10%? Do you recall?
I do not.
It's about leadership trajectory. So
I think it's creating. Yes, and then from a coach to an AP, right? Coach to AP, like there has to be some sort of delineation if anyone wants to.
I know you just said 3% was very much, but what if it was 5%, 8%? Do
we still get the 2,000 out of it that Connie was looking for?
I mean, I would recommend to do 4% and 8%. Because I think you're good. You have to, the way this is written philosophically is that you have to have a delineation between a reading interventionist and an instructional coach. So even if you cut them both in half, where you said 2.5%, if you took it from 5% to 4% and 10% to 8%.
4% and 8%.
Yeah, that's going to be my suggestion. Could we do 4% and 8%? Because then you're still getting a 10% increase as a reading interventionist, or I'm sorry, as a coach, and in total, it's a bit. I'm not trying to put it lightly or anything, like as far as like their duties or anything. I appreciate everything that they do, but what I'm saying is that when you look at the scope of, we're already giving 2% across the board, and then you're talking about that, then that's a big increase in pay in one chunk sitting. That's just my thought on that.
And
That's a really good point, to get them to that level. Like it overall, when you look at the big picture, I think what you're saying, when you get them to that picture, it is really, in fact, a 10 and potentially an additional
for all of our
11.
teachers.
Potentially
all of our teachers
11.
are looking at 11% difference in their contract from what was issued last year to what they'll get issued this next year. 3%. Because they'll have 6% plus the 2% that used to be stipend, which will now be in the contract, and the 3. You're all teachers are getting 11%.
And thanks for answering that, because teachers were not clear and wondered that question. So I'll go back and spread the word, that because they weren't sure if the stipend was a one-time or if that was going to stick. So thank you for clarifying.
So we're super excited about that. So that's why I was a little nervous about your 3%, because I did the math. That means the starting salary for the least experienced teacher will be $45,200 if we get to 3%. We finally made it. Plus pretty much the guaranteed $5,000 to $7,000 performance pay. We finally have done it. That also then is all staff too.
And to have 4 days.
So if we were, so what you're saying is to jump to a 4% for intervention and 8%. So then essentially you still have that, that 50% leap, if you will.
Can you all support that?
I suggested it, so I support it.
Take all the credit. Connie's saying, I thought it first.
I want Connie to take the credit. I want Connie to take the credit, not me.
It was funny because we were all reading your mind. We're just that good.
Okay, looking around the room, I think we're good on that. All right, show us our bottom line. You're happy with the categories. Show us what I'm going to post.
I almost got your athletic directors in there.
How much are we short? I can't read that.
8,000.
Sorry.
We're gonna keep working.
I hate that is not above the line, because that is so much work.
All right, so
I
would you be
understand.
comfortable with me saying to the board, you all recommend using reserves to
Make sure that happens. Would that be?
That affects how many? I'm sorry.
4 schools?
4 schools. And the assistant principals are currently doing that, right?
It's shared between assistant principals and principals. They have to.
That's so much work. That's so much extra.
Okay. You did some good work here, folks.
Thanks for the standing 8,000.
All right. Well, next steps is our final agenda item. Next steps simply is
I will check and recheck with Beth all the numbers. We'll take out the black categories. It really is your sequence list of prioritization. We'll take that to the governing board. They'll do their priorities. And then after that, you would start to see the positions or the changes in stipends and some of those things start to show up in governing board meetings. Once they approve these priorities, then that frees us up to bring them back as individual agenda items to the governing board after that.
Do you happen to know which meeting this will be?
It will be Monday.
Oh, yeah.
It will be Monday.
Let's not waste any time, okay?
It will be Monday. Yeah, I'm sticking around late so I can put some of this all into a board packet. So, all right. Well, with that, we will adjourn, and thank you all.